I wanted to create a fun Mother's Day card, and I thought, why not take you guys along for the ride? You can get a little insight of what my process is. I have a general loose idea for what I'm going to do, but things change, and we have to learn how to kind of just go with the flow and adapt. And what can we do when we are in a stage that we're not happy with our project? And how to continue on. I'm going to show you all of that in this tutorial. I'm prepping my card right now. So what I'm doing is I have I started with a 7x10 piece of watercolor paper. I folded that in half and now I'm just taping off the edges. I was going to go with a little bit wider of a piece, and what this is going to do is give it somewhat of a clean border around the outside. Not completely necessary. I thought it would just be a nice little touch to it. My style is a little bit grungier, messier, and so this is going to give it a little bit of a feeling of a cleaner edge, a little bit more polished of a look, but not too polished. So I did that. I squirted out some of my paint colors and just tested them out to make sure I'm in the realm that I want to be, and I'm going to get started now. So I want to get some color down on the page first. I think it's really important when you have a blank page to just get something down relatively quickly before we find ourselves overthinking what is happening. That can be loose pencil scribbles. Inks are a really great way because it's just like, wow, the page is already ruined. I can't make it worse now type of thing. Although I love the look of inks and splotchiness and all of that good stuff. So I added in some scribbles. I sopped up some of that excess paint so that I'm not totally blending with the new paint that I'm putting down, but I did not take the time to fully dry it. I want to keep going and not overthink what I'm doing. And so I think it's then important to move a little bit quicker. So I did speed up this video for a time lapse because I take a lot longer than I normally do. And you'll see here, we get to a point where I get a little bit frustrated and I'm not sure if I even want to continue on. So I actually thought this was a great one then to show you guys, because not everything goes to plan, no matter how much you're in your studio, no matter how much you find the time to create art, there is going to be things that come up, and it's all about how we can work through that and get to the other side and have results that we're happy with. So here's the first thing that happens where I'm like, this is not what I intended. Mixing that white gesso in it mixed with the pink that was already down on the page. No problem. I expected it to, but I always think I'm going to like this color more than what I actually do. It always goes a little bit bubblegum pink for me, and for some reason that's just not my jam. I want things to either be more raspberry or more hot magenta, fuchsia colored. So at this point, I'm like, I'm not going to make it worse. So I just kind of went free form with those dots and put them down. And quite honestly, I thought to myself when I had gotten to this point, should I just start over? Because it's not going to be the most clean tutorial to edit for you guys or to show you. But I think it's super important that I show this to you as well, just as much as I show the times where things do go according to plan. Because the reality is it's not going to go according to plan or what it looks like in our heads a lot of the time. So I'm adding this in. I added more magenta, and then I decided to go black, which is a great option. I love black gesso, but then I was like, oh, it's a little bit more grungy punk than I originally intended for Mother's Day. When I think of Mother's Day, I think spring and bright colors and all of that. And so the black kind of took this in a direction that I wasn't wanting it to go. But again, we take what we do and we pivot and keep moving on. So I knew I wanted to bring some light color back into this, some brightness, bring back in some of that negative space. And so the way I'm doing that is everything is dry. So I know I can come back in safely, add white gesso, and it not totally mix with everything before, because that's what happened before when I added white gesso is we got that bubblegum pink color. And while know it's a fine color, for some reason, it's just not the color for me. So I added in some white and then I dried everything again. I'm not showing you the heat gun sections here because we don't need that extra time added. And then I did some scribbles. I'm bringing back in some of that magenta because we lost some of it. So now we're getting to the point where I'm getting happier again with what is happening. I'm liking that we added some of that magenta that got covered up, but the colors that I wasn't liking are kind of covered now. But in a way, they're poking through some of those layers underneath, which I like. I think it's really good to get that dimension in the layers. It's so easy to just put one layer down or two layers down and then kind of be done and not know if we should continue, because we do run the risk of doing something that we don't like. And I experienced that with this one here, but it's great to push yourself to keep going and explore what you can do. So this is turning out a lot busier than I originally intended. So I'm doing a lot of problem solving as I go along here. And so it's good to work those muscles and see then what you can do, what you can adapt to take it. I thought I was going to do a little bit more collage in this one, like bring in some text, things like that. But sometimes when you're working in this small of a space and you're almost doing painting like you would on a canvas or something, it's easy to get that negative space taken away from you and things just end up looking mushed together and too busy. And so some of the ideas do need to be cut out or changed in some way. So I knew I didn't want this to be totally just paint. I did want some dimension going on. And so my alternative for collage was this tissue paper. It is a transparent. Once it is put down, I'm using matte medium, but we still get the appearance of those art marks, those circles, those splotchy dots, which I really like. So I've been enjoying using tissue paper more, and this is actually just a commercial tissue paper, and it makes really easy collage for you. You can also create your own with tissue paper, or oftentimes I use deli paper, which gives the same sort of transparency. This tissue paper is really nice because of how thin it is. And there's nothing special about it. That's just like with any tissue paper that I do. So at this point, I do still have the tape around the edges. I could really take that off at any point. And I had considered doing the tissue collage where it actually goes all the way out to the edges. So I wasn't sticking to that inner border, but I had already started, so I was keeping with it at that point. At this point, I know I want to bring more texture and dimension into the card. I can't keep adding more to the background unless I was to come in and really try to bring back out that negative space. But at this point, the tape around the edges is more distracting than helpful. So that's my indication that I want to take it off. I had originally thought, well, I'll just keep it on until the end and then take it off. But sometimes when your paint is such a contrasting color to the color paper you're working on like this, it can become quite distracting. It made the whole card feel darker than it actually was. So you can see what those edges did around the outside, and it's not a perfect border, but I really didn't care that it was anyway. When you're using wet mediums, especially like those inks, sometimes it will seep under the tape. And my goal was never to have like perfect, pristine edges around it, just something that ensured there would be extra lightness brought to the page. Now I cut a section out here because this was more challenging for me than I thought it was. And that's not why I cut it out. I just cut it out for time because you're still going to get the overall feeling of what I did here without that. I had thought I was going to add some neon pink tulle onto it. In the end, it looked way too like princess punk type with the pink and the really dark black, and it just wasn't the vibe that I wanted to go for. I'm happy with the black that's left in it right now, but I didn't need it to feel even edgier than that. So I wanted to bring some of the original lightness and airiness that I wanted back into the piece. So I have scraps of fabric here. I have different textures, and so now I'm just playing around to get something that I am looking for. So I had thought some sort of little collage textile cluster would be really nice on the front. I'm also going to be bringing in words. The Happy Mother's Day I want to put on the front. And this is just a big game of trial and error. You won't know if you like or dislike something until you do it. Of course, I have ideas of what might work and what might not work. But honestly, I think what tripped me up here is this background is a lot busier than I had in my head to start with. And so that means that the element that I'm going to be putting on top here, it can't add to the busyness. It needs to act as a spot for your eye to rest. And so that's exactly what I'm trying to do. So I have this piece of fabric. It's actually a bed sheet, I believe. I had used it at one point to sop up extra ink. So it has some splotchiness and texture dimension already added to it, which is really nice. It's not just a plain white piece of fabric. And I have this plum color thread that I am stitching now through it. I am being quick with this. I don't want to overthink it. And I'm intentionally pulling a little bit tighter than what I would if I wanted this to lay completely flat. But I want to bring in some of those ripples with the stitching. This is going to be the main textural element on the page. And so I'm okay with it being pulled tighter in some areas. And then actually when I go to adhere this to the page, I'll make sure that it keeps those elements. I'm doing just straight line back and forth. I'm putting my needle through the fabric several times. I'm not worried about being in perfect rows, uniform stitches, anything like that. This is mainly just for an added element on top, so I don't need to be too precise with what I'm doing. I'm also leaving my threads quite long on the front. I like the look of that. It just adds to the frayed nature. It brings everything, I think, to life a little bit more. And so we're not just making flat two-dimensional art. We're bringing this into a 3D realm, which I think is really fun and exciting. So still at this point, I wasn't totally sure that this is going to work on the page. But once I start playing around, I think it is what it needs to make this card successful in my book. Using that white fabric helped to bring some of that negative space back in. Adding a textured element that is raised above everything else means that it is going to be a place that your eye naturally lands on and is drawn to. I'm using my hot glue gun as just a fast way to put this down, and I'm overall pretty happy with how this is turning out. I do want my text still on here, so I did on the typewriter, I typed out a couple different options. I wasn't sure if I wanted the words all clumped together or just separate lines and then I would hear them all separate, but I think it's going to be most successful if I keep those words together. We already have the look or the appearance of a lot of little things happening with the different splotches of paint, and so I want to make this piece a bigger cluster and a spot for your eye to rest. And anytime you put legible words on a page, your eye is going to be drawn there because your mind automatically starts reading it. And so that's a nice little tip. If you feel like your page is kind of overwhelming, give the eye a spot to land and rest. I liked what was happening, but the dark piece that I put underneath kind of got hidden a little bit. And to allow it to stand out from the background, I wanted to add just a little bit more on that. So I'm adding an extra length onto this. You're not even going to really see that I added another piece, but it's just going to allow you to see it a tiny bit more. The ribbon that I'm using is actually a silk type ribbon, so it does have a bit of a sheen to it, and I like how it just made it pop out. Of course, I put my card in paint, and that's just the nature of the game. I don't mind the rest of the card getting paint and stuff on it. I think it adds to the overall artsy look of it, but a good possibility for you, if you don't want that, is to actually work on a piece that's separate, that's just the size of your front, or or maybe you could work on it just the size of the inner section that I did on the front without the taped part. And then you could just adhere that to the front of a card and keep your card overall nice and neat looking. And of course, I added water and paints and stuff to this, so I was okay with it becoming a little bit more warped. But that's a personal preference. I don't mind any of that. I took that quote or the words and put it on top there, glued it down, went a little bit on the edges to make it stand out. And just like that, we have a Mother's Day card with all of the goods and the bads in between, how we problem solved and got to the next step. So I hope some of these strategies work for you. Next time you're feeling stuck and you just feel like starting over, try to push through, see what kind of results you can get. Thank you all so much for watching. And if you're a mom of any sort, happy Mother's Day to you. And I hope you make a card like this or receive one. Have a good one, you guys. I'll see you next time.